What's up, Inspired Vision students, plus anybody else I might be catching on YouTube? We are on day 2 of 18 for our Accelerated Algebra I course. Okay, here's how today's going to work. We're going to do evaluation, function relationship, and linear functions today from a graph. So, as always, it is time to learn some math. Now, why do we see this big old star flag? Because we're getting ready for our STAAR test that we are going to conquer. Here is how this lesson's laid out today. We're going to do 3 STAAR release questions, then 9 guided practice questions, 9 independent practice questions that I'm going to want you to do on your own, and then 2 more STAAR questions where we're applying everything we've learned today to STAAR questions. Now, we're focused in on Category 1, TEKS A.12. So please subscribe so you can get all of the lessons to prepare us for STAAR. Okay, here's our first question. Now this question is talking about which table, so they're giving our x and y values, have the same relationship as y equals negative x squared plus 3x. Now notice how I said that was negative because it's our first term. Very important. The other thing that's important to realize is this is already a solved equation for y. Now, they're not always going to be, but we're going to learn about more of that later. But this is solved for y, so we can use our y equals key. Now, if you're not familiar with your calculator, your y equals key is the very top left key. This is the only time you can use your X button, which is right here. So you're going to type in negative x squared plus 3x into your y equals key all at once, just in that first y1 equals part. Now after you do that, and if you have a calculator and you need time, pause it, type this in, or figure out where your calculator is because it's very important and we're going to be using our calculator a lot today. So after you type this in, you're then going to go to your table. To get to your table, you're going to hit second graph. And now you should see just x, y values pop up on your table. So after you hit second graph, you are going to want to match up your x, y table or x, y numbers. So you should see x, y on your table. And you want to focus in on when x is 0. Tell me what y is. Now hopefully you're going to say y is also 0 because all of these numbers for x is 0 when y is 0. But then if you notice, each one of these gets a little bit different when you start seeing when x is 1. When x is 1, you should see y as 2, and then we can pick our answer just from that. So our answer is going to be H. Okay, so hopefully this was very easy to you, but if not, I'm just going over how to use your calculator because that is a very important tool for STAAR. Okay, next question. This time, they did something weird. It is f parentheses x. This is called function notation. So the way that you read this is f of x. That's how you read f parentheses x. F of x equals 2/3 x squared plus 8x. Then when they want to know the value of f parentheses x, f parentheses 6. This means f of 6. Now, don't get scared about this crazy notation. This is just function notation. Whenever they have f parentheses, whatever's inside the parentheses, that just means that's the number for x. So there's 2 ways we can do this problem. We can either plug in 6 for each one of our x's, or we can use your y equals key just like we just did for the last problem. So you get whatever you're comfortable with. I'm going to cover both ways, or do both ways like I'm doing. And that's a way to double check your answer. So if I'm going to plug in 6, you have to use your normal part of your calculator. So if you still have your calculator window open to the table, the way to get out of that is hit second quit. The quit key is right next to the second key. And that brings you to your normal part of your calculator, which is the same part of your calculator that you normally have after you reset your memory. Okay, now here's what you need to type in your calculator. You need to type in 2 divided by 3, because that's how you type in fractions, parentheses 6, close parentheses, squared. To use the squared key, you can do the x squared button that's on the left side of your calculator, and then plus 8 parentheses 6. Okay, this will give you your answer, which is the same answer you would get if in your y equals key you did 2/3 x squared. And remember, this is your x key, and this is your x key. The only time you can use your x key is when you're in your y equals key. All right, then you're going to look at your table when x equals 6. Both of these answers come out to be, 1 second. Come out to be 72. Okay, sorry I didn't already have that ready. All right, here's number 3. This one's talking about which set of ordered pairs. So each of these ordered pairs, you would think of your first number as an x, your second number as a y. That's what an ordered pair means, and it represents graphing it on the x and y axis. And it says which one represents y as a function of x. Well, something very important I need you to remember for this. Anytime you see the word function, that means you can only have one x. So for each one of these ordered pairs, we want the one that only has one x. So we need to look at each one of these answer choices and pick out which one only has one x, which is the same thing as saying which one doesn't have two of the same x's. So if you look at B has two -1s in the x spot. So that would make B wrong. For C, you have 2 3s in the x spot. That's the reason why C is wrong. D has 2 2s, but A, none of my x's repeat. So anytime it doesn't repeat, that's the answer I'm going with. Okay? Those are my 3 star questions. Now what we're going to do is our 9 guided practice questions where I'm going to cover these step by step. So, if you need a little bit of time, pause the video, copy down these questions. That way you can take notes or just follow along as I'm covering these questions. Okay, number one, it has a f parentheses -7. So the first thing we need to remember is that's when x is -7. Next thing is, remember we have 2 options here. We can either plug in -7 or put this function into our y equals key. Now another important thing here is not all the time when we have fractions is there only going to be one thing on the top, one thing on the bottom. This time we had 2 things in the bottom. So we need an extra parentheses no matter which way we do this problem. So, and also notice that there's a negative sign that we need to put with the 25. So if you're plugging in -7 in with your normal part of your calculator, you need to put the negative with the 25 and then put an extra parentheses around the whole bottom. So parentheses, another parentheses, -7 minus 9, close parentheses. That'll give you your answer. Now you don't always need this extra parentheses there, but it's good habit just to do it anyways. All right, so this will give you your answer. Or if you go into your y equals key, do -25 divided by parentheses x minus 9, close parentheses. Then you're looking at your table when x equals 7. -7 will give you your answer. Okay, so hopefully you've already picked which one you're doing and you have your answer. If not, don't let me beat you to the answer. Do it with me. It's the best way you can learn. And either way, you should see a decimal for your answer. Now, normally, unless it's an easy decimal like 1.5, that's a pretty easy decimal, they would want you to convert it to a fraction. If you don't know how to convert this into a fraction and you want to use the easy way of using your calculator to turn it into a fraction, you need to have this decimal in your calculator and then hit math, enter. The math key is right here underneath the green key, and just hit enter twice because it'll pull up a menu, math, it says a fraction, you would hit enter and hit enter again to turn that decimal into a fraction. And you should have 25/16 as your answer. Okay, number 2, we have another evaluation question, this time when x is -2, and our x is in the exponent spot. So when we plug this in, if we plug in -2 in for x, we would have to use an up arrow to write our exponent. Now where's that up arrow? It is right here above the division key. So if you're plugging it in, you're doing 5 up arrow parentheses -2, and you'll get your answer. Or your y equals key, you need to do 5 up arrow x, and that way x is in the exponent. You're not just writing 5x, because then that will be wrong. Okay, either way, you should have an answer that is a decimal. That decimal, we need to turn it into a fraction, and that fraction is going to be 1/25. Okay, next problem on this slide. We have a negative out in front, so we need to put that negative with a 15. We have x squared on the bottom. This still counts as one thing, although if you want to type it in with parentheses, that's okay. And then -3. So, 2 options with evaluation. That -3, we can put -3 squared like this. Notice how I did the parentheses. Otherwise, it won't give us the right answer when we're squaring a negative number. Or using your y equals key, -15 divided by x squared, and then we're looking at the table when x is -3. Okay, again, either way, we're going to get a decimal. So that's the reason why the math enter key is a time saver when you're taking your test. Turn that decimal into a fraction, because your decimal right now is actually -1.6 repeating. Since it's repeating, we definitely want to turn it into a fraction to be -5/3. Okay, that's our first 3 questions. Moving on to our next questions. We're now learning about what makes a graph a function. When you're looking at a graph and seeing if it's a function or not, you're still thinking, okay, I can only have one x. But then you're doing something called the vertical line test. What the vertical line test is, and again, this is anytime you have a graph, is you're going to draw a straight line down on what your function is. So my function is not the y-axis, it's not the x-axis. In this case, it's this straight line going straight down. Now, if I draw my vertical line test, which is this in yellow, on top of my straight line that's in yellow, it can only hit once. But each one of these y's are answers. So that means it hits infinite amount of times. That's the reason why this first one's definitely not a function. All right, maybe this will make a little bit more sense with B. If I draw a vertical line down right here, I'm going to count how many times it just hits my function. Or if I draw a vertical line down right here, we're going to count how many times it hits my function. Both of these hit twice. So since it hits twice and not once, it's not my answer. Same thing with D. This is going to hit twice, so this is not my answer. However, C, no matter where I draw a vertical line down, since this is curving here, it's only going to hit once on the curve, and that's my answer. Okay? Now that's a quadratic function, but they didn't even ask that. They just asked which one's the function. Okay, next. On number 5, this isn't a graph. This is called a mapping diagram, and they still only want to have one x. So if you look at A, I actually have 2 3s. I can only have 1 3 here, so A is not right. For C, I have 4 3s, and now I realize they only wrote 1 3, but they have 4 arrows coming out of 3s. And if you think about each one of these as coordinates, this is 3 -7, then 3 1, 3 2, and 3 8. Reason why C is not your answer. So if I was right, this as a coordinate would be -7, -7. Okay? Same thing over here. That's -7, -7. But then when I look at this 3, 2 arrows are coming out of it saying it's 3 1 and 3 2. Because there's 2 3s here, that's the reason why B is not it. And then D, I have my arrows pointing towards this same y, but that doesn't matter. What only matters for a function is I can only have one x, so that's the reason why D is the answer. No, none of my x's repeat. All right, moving on. Number 6, we have a picture of a graph again. Okay, so we're going to study each one of these graphs and see which one only hits once on a vertical line test. So looking at A, I'm going to draw a vertical line down, and then I'm going to count how many times this hits. So this hits twice. Since it hits twice and not once, A is not right. On B, I draw a vertical line down on these dots, and it hits 3 times. Now, does it matter that these were straight, these were lines, solid lines, and these were just points? No, not for a function. Okay? So if you have 3 dots spread out and none of them are on top of each other, that would make it a function. All right, D is a straight line going down, which means it hits multiple times, infinite amount of times, in fact, making it not a function. Now, C does something weird. It has an open white circle followed right underneath it, a solid circle shaded in. That means it doesn't hit on the open circle, but it does hit on the solid circle. But either way, it would only hit once here, and these lines are not on top of each other. So no matter where else I draw a yellow line down, it only hits once. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. C is my function on number 6. Okay, number 7. Number 7 looks confusing at first. It wants us to make a change to the tables in the values in the table to make it a function. Because right now, it's not a function. Anybody see why it's not a function right now? Well, a function means you can only have one x. And if you look at it, we currently have 2 x's, and those are the 4s, negative 4s. So we need to pick an answer choices that changes a negative 4 to a different number. Well, let's go through it one at a time. At A, it says change negative 4, 0 to another negative 4, 5. But that means my negative 4 didn't change at all. And looking at B, it says change negative 2 to another negative 2. But again, we're needing to change the negative 4 and not the negative 6 like in D. Only C says change a negative 4, negative 8 to a completely different number of 0, meaning if I put a 0 here, then I would have negative 6, 0, negative 2, negative 4, and none of my x's repeat, which is what we want. Okay, next. These are our last 2 guided practice questions. This is a different concept, and I'm trying to get us ready for what's a linear function and not a linear function. And a lot of times it's easy to look at a graph to see if it's a linear function or not, and that's what we're doing with these 2 questions. So on both of these types of problems, which is what you're about to do on your own in a second, is we're going to put each one of these answer choices into our y equals key. That's one way to handle this question. And then we're going to look at our graph. So when we type A into our y equals key, just notice that there's 2 terms in the denominator of this. So we're going to have to put this in parentheses. Okay, so you're going to use your y equals key, type this in, and hopefully you get a picture that looks like this. Okay, I'm going to pause for about 10 seconds, but I can't pause for too long because I can't make the video too long. So again, you hit pause on the video on each one of these questions and see if you can figure out what the graphs look like. So on B, if I graph negative 7 divided by x, you should have a graph that looks like this. On C, if I do negative x divided by 7, we should have a graph that looks like this. And then on D, we're going to do 3 divided by 4 minus 2 divided by x and have a graph that looks like this. Now, we're asked to find which one's a linear. Linear means it has to make somewhat of a straight line. It can either be a straight line going up, it can be a horizontal line, or a straight line going down. Those are all linear functions. So the one that's a linear function here is C, because our line is going straight, going slope downwards, but we're going to learn more about that later. Now another thing here is, notice my x's were in the denominator of all the problems except for C. That is another big clue why C is the answer. All right, moving on to this one on the bottom. Now these straight up and down lines, that does not mean parentheses. It is not a typo. It is something special in math called an absolute value. Absolute value give you a graph that either looks like this, a V, or a downwards V. Okay, now, how to type absolute value in your graph. Now, also, keep in mind we're going to type each one of these in our y equals key. So again, once I teach you how to do absolute value, pause and make sure you can type each one of these in your y equals key, see what they look like. But in order to type this one in like A, we would first start off with a negative symbol in our y equals key. Then we're going to do something called math. We're going to go back to that math key just like we did to turn decimals into fractions. And we're going to go over arrow 1, right arrow over 1 time, hit number, or it's already on number, and then hit enter. This will put your up and down lines into your y equals key if you're using an 84 plus. If you're using an 83, then it says ABS parentheses. But at 84, we'll put up and down lines. Then you type x plus 3. Then to get out of the absolute value sign, you have to arrow out of it and hit divided by 6. So if you did this right, your graph looks like this. If you didn't do it right, then keep practicing or ask somebody for help. I wish I could help you, but this is pretty important. So it's negative, math, arrow over to number, enter, x plus 3, then arrow out of the absolute value, divide by 6. Now this is the same thing as a downwards V. So that's definitely not linear, but let me go through, or you graph the rest of these, and we're going to figure out which one's linear. Okay, now B. B, we should be typing in x minus absolute value negative 6, and our graph looks like this. For C, our graph should look like this. And for D, our graph should look like this. Now we're picking the one that is linear, so the one that is linear is B. Okay, now that is our guided practice portion of our lesson. And we're now moving to our independent practice. The way that this independent practice works is I'm about to show you 9 questions that I want you to copy down on your own or take a screenshot of so you can work on before I cover the answers. We're covering the same topics, which one's linear or nonlinear, which ones are functions, and how to do evaluation. All right, so here's these 3 questions. I'm moving on to show you the next 3. Pause the video if you need more time to copy these questions down. Here's the next 3 questions. Okay, so number 4, you're talking about which one would make it a function. Number 5, you're doing evaluation. Number 6, you're seeing which one is a nonlinear function. Okay, pause the video if you need more time, but I'm about to show you your next 3 questions. Number 7, we're seeing which one is a function. Number 8, we're doing evaluation. And number 9, we're seeing which one of those graphs are linear. Okay, when I change the screen in about 10 seconds, I'm going to have the answers on. So I want you to see if you're getting these answers right. If you only miss 1 or 2, then we could see, or you can see why you're missing that question, but that's not a big deal. Hopefully you're getting most of these right, because these are easier versions of what's going to get us ready for the STAAR questions. Okay, here we go. Number 1, they're asking us which function is nonlinear. If I graph A, I'm going to get a little curve going down on A. So A is the one that doesn't have a straight line. The rest of these should have straight lines. On number 2, they're asking us which one's a function. On A, B, and D, A and B especially, they're going to hit multiple times because they have a vertical portion of, it's called a piecewise function when it's separated like this. but they have both vertical portions that hit multiple times. On D, it's going to hit twice if you draw the straight vertical line test down right here. Now on C, they have these two open circles right above each other, but it doesn't hit twice right here on C. All right, on 3, you need to remember put parentheses on the denominator, and you should have 2/3 come out as your final answer. Okay, here comes number 4. Number 4, the problem right now is we have 2 4s in the problem. So we have to change one of those 4s to be something like 8. And then we won't have 2 4s in the problem. On 5, we can plug in -8 in for x. Just make sure you put an extra parentheses in the denominator here because there's 2 terms. And then -8 plus 4 come out to be -4, or if you just straight type it in your calculator, you should have -9 as your answer. Number 6, which one's non-linear? The one that's not linear is the one that comes out as not a straight line, and that would be C. And if you graphed it, it looks something like this. And again, it's because x is in the denominator. That's another key reason. Number 7, we're looking for which one's a function. The one that's a function is when x doesn't repeat, and C would be the one that doesn't have an x repeat. Number 8, if we put in 4 in for x, then we're doing 4 plus 1 squared minus 4 into your calculator, or just type this into your y equals key. Look when x is 4. Either way, you're going to get 21 as your answer. And then finally, number 9, which one is a straight line? That would be A. A would come out as a straight line. Okay, now we're on the tail end of our lesson. We're just going to practice 2 more STAAR questions that have this concept, and then we're done for today. Okay, here's a question. Looks very similar to the ones we just done. This one says, which representation, so which answer choice, does not have y as a function of x? So again, they're looking for which one does not have y as a function. So they're trying to be a little tricky here by not show. So since it's one that doesn't show a function, then we want the answer that has more than one x. So look at F. Does x have more than one x? Does H have more than one x? Does G have more than one x? Or does J? And the answer that you hopefully said was J. Now each one of these dots that are right on top of each other means that x is repeat. So J is my answer. All right, last question for today. Looks kind of confusing at first, kind of overwhelming. Okay, so it says the function w, where w of 9 equals -7, and w of -7 equals 9. What is the value of y when x equals -7? And right here, that says y equals w of x. That just means y equals the answer to w of x. Okay, so what is y when x is -7? Now, if you're feeling overwhelmed with this question, it's because you see all of this math lingo that looks very confusing. What I need you to do is just focus on what is the question actually in this problem. The question in this problem is, what is y when x equals -7? Now, during this whole lesson, I told you or taught you that whenever there's something in parentheses, that's when x equals that number. So just look when x equals -7. It's somewhere in the question. This question actually involves no math at all. So this means when x is 9, and this means when x is -7. So we want when x is -7, and that answer is right there on the screen. So that means the answer is 9. I know, they were trying to be mean, but this is actually a pretty easy question. Okay, so thank you for listening to this lesson. Check my YouTube for each of the next lessons that will be posted. And until next time, thank you.